there's, you know, I guess it's hard to describe process because it's all sort of, for me, tied together in the sense that sometimes I have the idea first, and then I find the materials to create the thing that I'm thinking about. Other times it's, you know, I'm working on something and the idea is inspired from the piece I'm working on or the thing I'm working on. Like, you know, so much of my work is today, these days anyways, is mechanically based. So I'm constantly tearing things apart and figuring out how they work and reassembling them and trying to make them better because that's part of what I try to talk about in the works. And I have a lot of random synapses that just sort of pop in, like out of the blue. So, like the wheelchair, dragster, that was literally one of those things where I woke up in the morning and I just said, well, why don't I build this dragster I want to build first out of a wheelchair? Because then I don't have to worry about building a whole roll cage, all these other things. And then the more I worked on it, the more I realized, oh no, that's the piece. That is the piece. So it had more symbolism than I was originally intending and all these other things. So these things feed back and forth. Mm-hmm. And as you're probably aware yourself, I mean, as you're working through something, things become even more solidified. You know, the idea of what you're working on. I mean, if we know what we're going to end up with in the end before we even start, why the hell make it, right? Mm-hmm. So you make the project, you start the project, you get into the project, and then it starts to evolve as you start to understand what it is you're making from you know, different points of view, and then how you yourself are connecting to this piece. The works for me in the process is thinking. It's all about thinking, and you know, I'm a very physical person. I come from a making kind of background, so the process is you know, integral. I need that sort of thing, but I also do a shitload of research. Just I don't know. I can't stop researching things. I think it's my dad and me. So research. Well, I mean, research is like so I'll get an idea that's like right now. I've got it. For some reason today it just popped in my head that I really like Formula One motors. Mm-hmm. These things are amazing, and the different configurations and all these things. And one of the things that I've always been sort of fascinated with is the fact that in the early days they switched the position of the exhaust in the intake, so that the exhaust ports become the intakes and the intake ports become the exhaust ports. So this way they can consolidate all the exhaust to the top of the motor and run it out the back, and the sides become the intakes. And there's a practicality to it, mechanically wise and stuff like this. But I just started thinking today, it's like, I want to build one like that so that I understand what it is. And then as an art project, I can, it's the creativity, it's how I problem solve it. What happens in this sort of thing. So I have to start by researching, how I can go about doing this. I mean, I have to understand how they mount the carburetors on the exhaust ports, right? What kind of setup do they use for that? So do I have to mill something specific? Mm-hmm. Or is it just something mounted? So I have to start that sort of research. And then it's like it's a building process. So I think of my work often as backyard mechanic type of thing, because my first car was literally a backyard mechanic thing. We took an engine from one car and threw it in a different car and had no idea if it would fit. It did. We got lucky. We had to change some parts around so it would fit. But it's that kind of ingenuity. You take things that don't normally go together and try to rework it so that they do work, and hopefully you'll come up with something even better. So that's what I think about when I'm working in my work. So I have this motor block right now that I used in the piece previous. It was called Carcass 318. That I've always been planning on tearing the whole thing down, and now I'm thinking about using that. It's a completely impractical motor to use for this project. So, in and of itself, I think that's fascinating because I have to understand that particular motor, all its foibles for why it's an impractical motor for using this, and then solve that problem. So I have to research it and find, and through that research, I often discover things that I find fascinating. Like, you just run across, random bits of history that just, wow, that came about because this person had this other weird problem. Like, there's oh crap, now I can't think. It's a GT racer, Ford GT racing car that had a little, it stylistically, it had this little bump in the hood. So, the front end came up, the windshield, and then there were, right over the driver's side, there was a bump, and it went back. And it became very iconic of this particular car. And it was because when they designed the car and built it, they forgot to take into account the helmet. So they had to literally they had to cut out a section of the car and raise it up so that they could get the helmet in this car, right? And it's just that sort of weird stupidity moments that make something very iconic. And I think that finding that history and understanding, where that comes from is genius, because these things are made by humans. They're made by people, foibles and everything, right? And that's what I find exciting, and that's what I find interesting. And I think that's when people see the works, they also become intrigued by it. They literally often will point to things and go, oh, how'd you solve this? What was this thing? That, and it's that sort of, that conversation you get, right? You get that curiosity. You also have those connections to father-son relationships. Often, even the women who visit the shows, the shows tend to be very, for lack of better words, they seem to be very macho kind of shows, and so you would think that most people wouldn't. Women wouldn't enjoy it, or whatever you want to say about it. But the conversation I've had is completely opposite of that. It triggers memories often of, like, their dad or their brother who had done something similar, right? Would work on the car, fix the car. It ties back to the generational sort of thing too. Days when people fixed things themselves, worked on their cars themselves, and that sort of their process, right? I'm trying to connect to those different processes that have existed all along, and making those connections, because we're losing those, I think, too, in modern society. I think we're gaining so many things, but we're also becoming a throwaway society, and that bothers me a lot. So I feel it's nostalgic, but it's comforting too. That's a daily thing, right? it's the insanity of trying to work. We don't live in ivory towers. I'm on the second floor of an industrial building. I would prefer to be in a gas station garage working my work. Concrete floors and things, but I got a freight elevator, so I've solved certain problems like that. But yeah, this is not I'm not in this building alone. There are other people in this building, and they play their music, they play their noises, they play whatever it is they're working on or doing. And often I find, you probably have this experience too. It's like, the music you're listening to is not going to be the same thing as the person next door is listening to, and their music is going to annoy you or whatever it is. And because I don't have that isolated environment, I've gone to wearing headphones a lot, in-ear ones, and sometimes I even put my welding headphones over top of them, Well, I don't know. It kind of gives me that feeling of like I'm working. So there's that. But yeah, no, there's all sorts of problems. But again, for me, it becomes they're frustrating, admittedly. Um, there's more serious frustrations. The money, right? Money is never there. Money is always a problem. However, it's always been a problem. So you make it, you work it out, you figure it out. There are times when I can afford to buy the parts I need, and more often I have to jerry rig stuff, figure it out. Even making my own parts from scratch or cobbling together something else from another thing. Or when it's that time, I switch gears and I go into something I can do, like draw or work on a computer or do more research. Um, you know, I like varying what I'm doing. Anyways, I go back from drawing. I go back to painting. Um, you know, I always go back to the motors at some point and get them. They're the ones that are usually on the back burner because they cost the most. That's the biggest outlay of money. So that's when the research time comes in, things like that. But then, every once in a while the money does come in and I buy myself an engine hoist, or I've got a couple engine hoists now, and shit, that makes me happy. It's like that, when you overcome that obstacle, when you have that thing that's been bugging you for so long, and then you get over it, it's like, oh my god, this is the best, right? And now I'm like in a happy place, and just simple things like buying an engine stand. It's like been the longest thing to get over that hump of buying an engine stand, and now I own several. Because once I got over the hurdle of the first one, I realized this thing is just too. I need this. This is a tool I need. I have to have, and everything else was just like such a pain in the ass for me. I apologize for all the swearing, but it's like, yeah, it's. You get the right part, you get the thing, and all of a sudden you realize how much you've been sweating it out before, right? It's like, working with the wrong brushes for so long, and then you realize this big fucking brush really does the job. Oh my god! And then you want to paint all the time with that thing, but you go back, you use the small brushes, you use all the different tools that are at your things. Tools. I'm a tool guy. My dad was a tool guy. When he passed away, I inherited his tools, which became this massive collection of tools and redundancy. But I won't get rid of them. You can always have 30 screwdrivers. It's like, sure, why not? The two big dream projects I've got right now are building this Formula One engine, which it wouldn't be a real Formula One engine, but it would be something like that. But so that just literally that popped into my head today, and as soon as it did, I just started thinking, yeah, this is something I want to do. This. So after this interview, I'm researching the hell out of it. The other one I've been working on for a couple of years, and it's the project that started the wheelchair dragster. Before I built the wheelchair dragster, I was building a full-scale dragster, and old school, early '70s style. I found some pictures of old ones, and I had to figure out the scales and sizes because these guys literally just drew them on the floor. There's no blueprints, so I figured it out and stuff. But that piece eventually is supposed to become, well, it still got a ways to go because the parts to make it a functioning real dragster are expensive, and that's where my walls hit all the time. It's like, okay, I've taken it as far as I can do. I'm going to have to spend a couple $100 on this part, and I haven't got that, right? So, but ideally that dragster becomes a full-scale dragster, and then what happens is So it's got the wheels on it. It fully operates. Everything is that, and then it's set on top of a large metal plate, and the steel itself is unfinished, and then it is electrified. The steel plate is a ground, and the motor or the dragster frame itself, the steel dragster frame is electrified in a way that it becomes a plasma speaker. And a plasma speaker is when you have an arc of electricity jumping from one point to another point, and there's a modulation that goes on in that thing, and that modulation changes the sound, the way it creates sound waves. It becomes a speaker. So it's this modulation of the electrical sparking creates sound, and it's a crackly sound, and it's haunting. So I've done some small-scale experiments with it, and I just found that I love it even more as a result. It's just like I want to do this on a large scale, but I really need to get my hands on some people, science people, who actually can build me one that works on a large scale. Like the small scales, you can get an arc maybe this big. I can get the arc, but they burn out. So it's always a trick of getting the science right, the mechanics, the electronics of it right. So I need to talk to some electricians. Those are all, it all boils down to expenses. But that's my current dream project, and it's been going on a long time, and it's always bothered me because I would just love to go boom, 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 boom. Let's get this done. Well, for me, and this is funny you bring that up because I was just having this argument in my head just the other night. Was this is art is a game for the rich. I mean, it's money, and it's like a lot of the most famous artists come from fairly wealthy families and had really decent backing in that way. Now it's not to deter, not to say that they're crappy artists and they just got that, but they had the safety net. They had this thing. Whether their parents were happy that they were artists or not is a whole other ball game. But there's that comfort. I don't have that, and I've never had that. So I'm used to like scraping things together and making it work, and that's going back to the whole backyard mechanic kind of feeling. I like that it provides that sort of edge. Would I like the money? Yes, I would totally like the money. I don't sweat the money, to be honest. When it's there, it's there. When it's not, it's not. Paying bills and such like that. Yeah, jobs. You get a job, you pay the bills, take care of it. The trick is to get a job that doesn't kill you, a job that doesn't demoralize you, that you can leave at the office when you're done, so you can get to the studio and be that guy, right? Some artists, want to sell their works so that they can, fund the projects. One of my favorite artists is Krista, right? And he makes drawings, he makes small projects and all of this to help fund his projects. Of course, he's also now at such a level that he could scribble on a piece of paper and he gets $1,000 for it. So, I like that idea of self-funding versus grants. I'm not a big one for applying for grants. I should try more, but I just don't like the idea of relying on others for the money. I prefer that I am the source of the money, that that I'll figure it out, right? And so I've got these teaching jobs, and they pay some of it. It's very low pay, but it's keeping me alive. I got my studio, so yeah, I mean, if I could sell some drawings, that'd make me happy. But I don't do the drawings to sell. I do the drawings because I like the drawing process. And hopefully, this is the thing for me. Um, if the work sells or not, I don't really care. For me, I think it's about the integrity of the work, right? It's about the integrity of making the work. And I make it because that's what I'm compelled to do. That's why I change mediums and I change subject matters, all these things, because I have a lot of different ideas and compulsions. But I'm doing them for me. I'm not doing them for a market. I'm not doing them for, isn't this, the latest trend is to do these whatevers. The moment I think I start thinking about, I should crank out 12 of these and I could sell them and make a couple bucks, that I'm in trouble, right? And I think in that sense, and I hope anyways, the integrity comes through in the work, and that's what people pick up on, and that's why they might purchase it, is because they believe it's honest work. And not only that, again, the work I'm working on now is probably the largest conversations I've had with people. I've done work that was much more disturbing. Very small market of people you could talk to. And, and the fact that I'm having conversations with people, the fact that it is connecting does make me happy. But the work makes me happy myself. And that's the important thing for me. Well, this is an interesting question because it raises, we go back to that, problems, the impediments and that sort of thing. Because basically, I'm a night worker. I could start working at 10 o'clock at night and work until 4 in the morning, and I would be a happy camper. But the real world doesn't really allow me to do that. They want me to show up and do things. People want me to socialize, things like that. What I tend to do is, I'm not a person who goes to the studio first thing in the morning. In the morning, I may like my quiet time to think and process some stuff about what I might do, what I'm going to do. But then that slowly drifts into all the necessary mishmatchy crapple you got to take care of in the day. Pay bills, go shopping, do all these sort of things. I like to get those things done before I come into the studio, right? Yeah, I'm no good without my coffee in the morning. That's a given. Yeah, it's like, I have to take care of those things. Otherwise, if that shit is on my mind when I step into the studio, I'm no good. So I try to clear out as many of those things during the day because that's when things are open. That's when things are, people are doing these things and I can take care of them and get them done. Plus, I'm out in the sun, which I never really get to see, particularly seeing I work in the night mostly, or I like to work at night. So for me, I tend to be like a cat in that I feel solar powered. In the sense, like I could just sleep on the couch in a sunny spot all afternoon and I'd be a happy man, and then go into the studio and just work my ass off. Yeah, rituals. I don't know. They change up too. Rituals per se. Like I've just developed a new ritual, which is no sodas, no heavy sugars during the day anymore until I've set it, like 6 o'clock. So it used to be a time when I would drink, sodas all day long, that rush of sugar and keeping you going, but it makes me sick. And now that I've switched it, it's like, I have half a bottle of, a soda or something, and I'm done. I'm good. That's it. So that's a new ritual for me. It's actually, I feel better. Some rituals are just, about keeping yourself healthy enough to do the work you want to do. Mm-hmm. I need to work on some of that more too. I've had shows in Boston that have been written about in the Globe. I've had shows in New York City that have been in magazines. I've had a number of shows here in Buffalo, which have been very nice, and things like that. But none of it's translated into money. None of it. Nobody's ever, and that's just the game. It's you have to be okay with that. And first of all, so yeah, the illusion I think most people have, which is, is yeah. First of all, as an artist, generally speaking, you're going to be an outsider to some degree because there's something within yourself that says, I can't do this the same way everybody else is doing things, right? I think that's one of the first things that artists kind of discover is this creative thinking process that says, I can't just do the same as everybody else, right? You have to look at things differently. You do look at things differently. The best artists look at things really differently and see the world the way the rest of the world is not seeing it. There's this illusion, I think, particularly like you said, kids coming out of high school, kids coming out of even first year of college or whatever, coming out of college, they think I'll do this for 3 or 5 years and then I'll be set. People will be buying up my work and I'll be showing in New York and I'll be making money in order. I'm not going to be Andy Warhol right off the bat, but I will be there. And it's like, it's not going to happen. It only happens to like the 1 percentile, really, in the art world. And most of those guys started with money to begin with. Again, I don't mean to, part of me is, obviously I'm an anarchist and communist in many philosophies, so, I can't do the workaday thing. I've done it, and it kills me inside. I've literally, it kills me. The only thing that ever came out good from working a 9-to-5 kind of job was I was so pissed off with it, I bought a Ducati. And I was making that kind of money, but that job made me so horrible that I bought the Ducati to make my life a little bit happier. And then I quit the job, and I have the Ducati still, and I love that thing. It's like the only thing that came out good out of that. Other than that, no, I can't do it. And I think that's the thing. It's like, and the older I get, the more it's just I cannot do it. I can't. I have friends who do it. I've got friends of mine who are very successful. A lot of the guys I went to high school with, are doing really well, very well. And I look at them, and they're doing all these, they're vacationing and all these sort of things, but they're doing it so boringly. It's so, I just look at it and say, oh my God, you took a cruise ship? Really? That's, maybe, I don't know. I guess if it works for you, that's not adventurous. If life isn't a challenge for me, I'm bored silly. A lot of my work, and I don't want to get really overly, philosophical and things like that, but, really a lot of the work that I deal with has to do with this death drive idea. And in that sense, the death drive is to try to get to a place of calmness, generally speaking, right? Dead, right? But there's a flip side to that, which is to push yourself to the ultimate extreme where you are touching that line of death, and then you find your calmness in that. So when things are chaotic, when things are tough for me, I don't like it, but I know that's when I'm living. And that's when I'm pushing things, I'm happy. I do take breaks. I mean, I do want like a little vacation now and then. I'm not constantly doing it. But this is why the motif of drag racing and racing in general is pushing things to the absolute limit of near death. to achieve something wonderful, right? And I think if you don't really have that kind of a drive to begin with, you're probably in trouble as far as being an artist goes.